At 5:26 a.m. local time in February 2026, a major incident struck the Iskander-M factory in Vatkansk, deep inside Russia. According to operational data from the night of the attack, 5 Ukrainian FP5 Flamingo strike drones penetrated layered defenses and triggered a blast that set part of the country's principal ballistic missile production hub ablaze. The strike was the culmination of a coordinated operation that began 26 minutes earlier, when a swarm of 28 Ukrainian LEA-100 reconnaissance drones appeared on Russian radar systems, drawing immediate reaction from air defense crews. Military analysts note that the factory in Vatkansk has long been central to Russia's output of Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles, systems launched at a rate of 40 to 60 per month against targets across Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence had monitored significant expansion at the site since mid-2025, including new machine halls and underground bays. Western assessments suggested production had tripled, aided by precision CNC machinery covertly obtained from suppliers in China, Taiwan, and Belarus through intermediaries that bypassed sanctions. The Ukrainian strike planners faced a major obstacle: the plant's distance, more than 870 miles from the front line, and its heavy protection by S-400 batteries deployed around the region, including in the Kazan and Ural sectors. Conventional long-range cruise missile options, such as Storm Shadow, were considered unlikely to survive fixed-route approaches under constant radar monitoring. Ukrainian forces therefore structured an operation dependent not on preset corridors, but on forcing a momentary lapse in Russian defensive coordination. That lapse began forming at 5:16 a.m., when the first 28 low-flying drones illuminated Russian radar displays. The small craft, flying at approximately 300 feet and 85 knots, produced radar signatures too faint for consistent tracking, but numerous enough to trigger alarms. Russian air forces scrambled 2 MiG-31 Foxhound interceptors from Perm within minutes, sending them to high altitude at Mach 1.8 to engage the detected contacts. Initial intercepts were effective. Using R-37M long-range missiles in coordination with Pantsir SM ground batteries, Russian crews destroyed more than half of the approaching LEA-100s. Command post officers reportedly categorized the incursion as a harassment action designed to assess reaction time. What they did not detect was the underlying Ukrainian objective, drawing Russian sensor focus upward and northwest while a separate strike package approached at extremely low altitude. By 5:21 a.m., as the MiG-31s repositioned for a second engagement run, Ukrainian electronic warfare operators initiated the key phase of the operation. Using a specialized spoofing system known as Ghost Letter, they generated synthetic radar signatures mimicking a salvo of hypersonic Archnet-class missiles inbound from high altitude. 7 such phantom signals appeared simultaneously, prompting the interceptor commander to order both MiG-31s back to base to counter what he believed to be a far more serious threat. This decision opened the airspace around Vatkansk. With interceptors returning to Perm and S-400 radars reorienting toward non-existent high-altitude tracks, Ukrainian planners secured a 17-minute window free of effective long-range defensive coverage. That window was enough for the true strike element, 5 FP5 Flamingo drones that had been flying for more than 4 hours at treetop level through the Ural foothills, to begin their final approach. The Flamingos used preloaded terrain-following routes, avoiding emissions that could expose them. Russian radar systems, focused on resolving the fabricated hypersonic signatures, did not detect the low-altitude craft closing in. At 5:23 a.m., a brief coded satellite pulse updated each drone with the final coordinates of a redeployed Pantsir SM unit, prompting a slight course correction. 3 minutes later, the strike phase began. The Russian duty officer at the Vatkansk command post reportedly glimpsed the first inbound drone, not through radar, but via an optical perimeter feed. Within seconds, Tor M2 and Pantsir SM batteries opened fire. 4 of the 5 drones were intercepted in rapid succession during intense close-range engagements. One, however, slipped through during a brief reload cycle, flying at approximately 380 knots and just under 200 feet. Its warhead detonated inside Assembly Hall 4, an expanded machining and assembly complex added in late 2025. Satellite imagery later revealed a breach approximately 110 by 85 feet in the facility's roof, and evidence of secondary explosions consistent with stored missile components. Initial assessments indicated structural collapse across roughly 40% of the eastern section. Ukrainian officials described the strike as a disruption of missile production capacity, achieved at a fraction of the financial cost borne by Russian defenders during the multi-layered response. Subscribe for continued coverage of this developing story. Following the strike on Assembly Hall 4 at the Vatkansk missile production complex, new details emerged regarding the sequence of events that enabled the fifth and final FP5 Flamingo drone to reach its target. According to Ukrainian operational briefings circulated after the incident, the Flamingo units began their flight shortly before midnight from dispersed launch points in the Carpathian region. They flew for more than 4.5 hours at extremely low altitude, relying solely on inertial navigation matched to detailed terrain mapping data. This technique allowed them to avoid detection by long-range surveillance radars whose line of sight was blocked by the curvature and relief of the Ural foothills. Ukrainian forces emphasized that the cost of the entire decoy and strike package was comparatively low. The LEA-100 reconnaissance drones used as distractions were built from consumer-grade components and emitted minimal electronic signatures, reducing the likelihood of early classification. Ukrainian analysts calculated that Russia fired 6 R-37M air-to-air missiles during the attempt to neutralize the decoys. With each missile valued at around $1 million, the defense expenditure far exceeded the cost of the inbound threats. The Pantsir SM crews also launched multiple 57E6 interceptors during the engagements, contributing further to the imbalance in resource expenditure. By the time the Flamingo strike drones reached the outer security perimeter, Russian defenses were already under strain. The S-400 system at the Efimivka coverage sector was still adjusting its scanning direction following the spoofed hypersonic radar returns. Pantsir SM teams closer to the factory continued tracking the remnants of the initial swarm approaching from the northwest. These system orientations created an 11-mile vulnerability corridor directly over the Vatkansk industrial zone. The Flamingos moved through this gap, spread across slightly offset tracks to avoid cross-sensor detection. At approximately 5:26 a.m., the Russian command post registered the first visual indication of an inbound object. Tor M2 batteries immediately fired at the initial pair of Flamingos, neutralizing 2 targets in quick succession. A third Flamingo attempted to exploit a momentary reload cycle but was intercepted by a secondary Pantsir volley. The fourth drone advanced along a southwestern ravine, using the landscape for concealment. That drone was also intercepted after an intensive tracking cycle that required simultaneous radar and optical confirmation. The fifth Flamingo, the only drone not engaged during the critical reload window, moved inside the inner perimeter and approached the newly constructed assembly bays. Intelligence reports had highlighted the reinforced structures and unusual power distribution nodes added during late 2025. Assessments suggested these bays may have housed advanced machining systems or components related to the development of an intermediate-range hypersonic missile platform. The drone's thermobaric and shaped charge payload detonated inside the primary assembly hall, causing internal overpressure damage and igniting materials stored on the facility floor. Ukrainian intelligence later reported at least 3 secondary detonations, consistent with the presence of stored energetic propellants or completed missile units. Russian air crews from Perm realized the scale of the incident only after receiving confirmation from the Vatkansk command post. The MiG-31 pilots, who had previously been redirected due to the spoofed radar signatures, were entering their landing approach when the report of structural fire and impact damage was transmitted. Sources familiar with the communication logs stated that the lead pilot had been seconds away from executing another missile launch against the decoy drones before the abort directive. The reaction within the squadron, according to defense observers, reflected growing concern over the implications of electronic warfare deception on high-speed aircraft responsible for regional missile interception missions. By mid-morning, Russian military units initiated their immediate response. Retaliatory strikes were launched toward targets across Ukraine, including energy facilities and substations in Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Zaporizhia. Ukrainian air defenses, including Patriot PAC-3, NASAMS, and forward-deployed F-16s, engaged multiple inbound threats. Armed forces officials reported intercepting 67 of 80 Shahed 136 drones and 28 of 40 ballistic missiles fired during the morning. 12 missiles penetrated defenses, damaging 2 substations and causing significant structural impact to a transformer facility in Kharkiv. Ukrainian authorities described the strikes as a rapid retaliatory action aimed at signaling that disruption to Russian missile production would be met with immediate escalation. The incident raised new questions about the durability of Russia's ballistic missile supply chain following the hit on Vatkansk. Ukrainian intelligence updates issued around noon provided early assessment metrics. Assembly Hall 4 was classified as non-operational, with an estimated restoration period of at least 60 days. Precision CNC equipment used for manufacturing propulsion modules of the Iskander-M system was among the assets listed as destroyed or heavily damaged. Analysts noted that these machines had been sourced covertly through intermediaries in China, Taiwan, and Belarus over an 18-month period, representing a substantial investment and a difficult-to-replace capability. While one reinforced bay at the complex showed visible impact damage, satellite images remained inconclusive regarding the content or purpose of the other two bays. Intelligence officials could not confirm whether hardware linked to the Archnik hypersonic program had been affected. What the assessments did confirm was that overall production had been disrupted but not fully halted. Additional missile manufacturing facilities in the Ural and Volga regions were expected to absorb displaced machining operations in the weeks ahead, according to analysts monitoring Russia's industrial redistribution patterns. As defensive assets shifted to cover gaps opened by the strike, military observers pointed to a broader strategic consequence. Each Pantsir SM system reassigned to rear area industrial defense represented a corresponding reduction in coverage along the active front. Likewise, MiG-31 aircraft placed on extended alert status for rear sector interception duties would reduce availability for operations along critical air defense corridors. Ukrainian officials characterized the outcome as a cost-effective tactic that forced Russia to commit disproportionate resources to protect infrastructure hundreds of miles from the battlefield. Subscribe for continuing updates on this developing situation. In the hours following the strike on the Iskander-M factory in Vatkansk, strategic assessments from both Ukrainian and Western intelligence communities began outlining the broader implications for Russia's missile production network and its air defense posture. Early evaluations indicated that although the damage to Assembly Hall 4 was substantial, it did not eliminate Russia's ability to continue manufacturing Iskander-M systems. Instead, analysts emphasized that the disruption would force a costly and time-consuming redistribution of technical equipment, personnel, and protective infrastructure across multiple sites in the Ural and Volga regions. The Russian Ministry of Defense, according to intelligence updates, prepared to transfer key machining operations to at least 3 additional facilities, with mobile air defense units scheduled for redeployment to safeguard new nodes of production. The strike also highlighted long-standing concerns inside Russia's defense establishment regarding the vulnerability of critical rear area factories. Vatkansk, located more than 870 miles from the Ukrainian border, had previously been considered beyond the reach of low-cost precision strike systems. Officials in Moscow now face the challenge of protecting dozens of dispersed production plants and storage depots across a territory spanning several time zones. Each location requires radar coverage, layered ground-based air defenses, and rapid response aviation, assets already heavily tasked by ongoing operations across Ukraine. Military analysts noted that defending every site at all times may be impossible without diluting coverage along frontline axes, where mobile missile systems and troop concentrations remain priority targets for Ukrainian forces. The financial imbalance exposed by the operation also drew significant attention. Ukrainian planners executed the strike with drones costing a fraction of the combined value of Russian interceptors expended during the defensive response. Replacing destroyed CNC equipment and restoring damaged assembly bays will require investment measured in millions of dollars and months of specialized transport and installation work. In contrast, the FP5 Flamingo units that reached Vatkansk were valued at approximately $180,000 each. Western observers described the operation as an illustration of asymmetric warfare, where inexpensive long-range systems paired with deception technologies can neutralize or overload sophisticated air defense architectures. As Ukrainian intelligence refined its assessment, it confirmed that at least one reinforced bay at the Vatkansk complex sustained structural damage. The status of the remaining 2 bays could not be verified. These sections of the plant had drawn sustained scrutiny from foreign analysts due to their expansion in late 2025 and the presence of specialized power infrastructure. Their function has not been publicly confirmed, though some officials indicated earlier that they might be related to the assembly or testing of emerging intermediate-range missile models. With satellite imagery unable to clarify the extent of internal damage, intelligence agencies noted that determining the impact on potential hypersonic development programs would require additional monitoring. Within Ukraine, authorities reported that air defense units remained at heightened readiness following the retaliatory strikes launched by Russia in the aftermath of the Vatkansk incident. The morning attack wave included 80 Shahed 136 drones and 40 ballistic missiles fired from positions in Bryansk and Belgorod regions. Intercept data released by Ukrainian defense officials documented the neutralization of the majority of inbound threats. However, 12 ballistic missiles reached their targets, causing power outages and structural damage at multiple energy facilities. Emergency crews were deployed to restore grid capacity, while defense operators tracked further Russian activity throughout the afternoon. By early afternoon, analysts across Europe and North America stated that the strike cast new uncertainty over Russia's ability to maintain the pace of its ballistic missile campaign. Even though production was not fully halted, the temporary loss of specialized machinery could reduce monthly output of Iskander-M missiles, narrowing the margin Russia relies on to sustain consistent launch rates. Intelligence estimates suggested a minimum 60-day interruption to operations in Assembly Hall 4, with restoration potentially taking longer if replacement equipment could not be procured quickly due to sanctions and export controls enforcement. Military experts also pointed to another consequence. Russia's need to reallocate air defense resources to rear industrial zones may leave tactical corridors more exposed along sections of the front line. Every Pantsir SM battery or MiG-31 interceptor reassigned to safeguard infrastructure hundreds of miles from combat effectively reduces the density of defensive coverage nearer to active combat areas. Ukrainian officials argued that such shifts create opportunities for targeted operations aimed at ammunition depots, logistics hubs, and mobile missile launch units. The Vatkansk strike has thus emerged as a case study in how long-range precision systems, layered with electronic deception, can disrupt industrial supply chains that support sustained missile warfare. The attack demonstrated that the vulnerability of fixed production infrastructure increases sharply when adversaries exploit misdirection and timing rather than brute force penetration of static defenses. As intelligence agencies continue to monitor the response from Moscow, analysts note that the strategic question now facing Russia is how to defend a dispersed set of high-value facilities against an opponent that only needs to identify a single weakness at a time. For ongoing development,